Evening YouTube. Now on Vibes tonight, I've got the little Sony SX speakers back in here, and tonight I'm going to try them out on the Pioneer SX434 receiver. Now these speakers, they are Sony SS CPX1 little bookshelves. They're only cheap little Sony bookshelf speakers, but I've got high hopes for these tonight on this Pioneer, because last night I had these speakers connected up to a vintage Sansui 310 receiver, and I had these little speakers really singing. For a little cheap pair of bookshelf speakers, I had them sounding really nice last night on that Sansui, so hopefully we can do the same tonight and get them sounding really good again on this Pioneer. So let's turn the Pioneer on and give it a couple of seconds to warm up, and then I should put a CD on. And this Pioneer, this SX434, this is the same power as the Sansui I was using yesterday at 15 watts per channel, but for some reason this Pioneer seems louder than the Sansui 310. Although they are exactly the same power, this Pioneer does definitely seem louder than the Sansui. And no, actually, I'm going to rephrase that. It doesn't seem louder than that Sansui. This Pioneer is louder than that Sansui. For 15 watts per channel, this Pioneer is loud. When I first got it, I had to check it up online because I thought it's got to be more than 15 watts per channel, but it's not. It is 15 watts per channel. It's just really loud for some reason, this Pioneer. So I've just turned on my CD player and pushed play, and in it tonight I have got, it's called Divas of Jazz. It's got loads of old female singers doing nice jazz songs, and it's a digitally remastered copy, so it's got a really good sound quality to it. So I'll give the little Pioneer a bit of volume, and we'll have a listen to the little Sonys. And a song that I do like on this CD, there's a really good version of Peggy Lee singing Black Coffee, and that song on the right system, I mean like a nice quality amplifier, big set of nice speakers, that Black Coffee song can just sound absolutely amazing. But I don't think these little Sonys are going to make it sound like that, because they are just not in the league of the kind of speakers I am talking about. These little Sonys are only little cheap budget friendly speakers, so we have to look at them like that in tonight's video. And straight away I am noticing that these Sonys are not sounding like they did on the Sansui yesterday. On that Sansui yesterday, even with the speakers sitting straight on the table, how I've got them at the moment, they sounded pretty good. But tonight on this Pioneer, same thing, the speakers just sitting on the table, they are sounding a bit spiky and a little bit tinny on this Pioneer. I know I've got a different sort of music going through them. Last night I had reggae going through them, but the first thing I did when I got in tonight was I put this CD on and played a few tracks through the Sansui with these speakers on it, and it sounded really nice. So I listened to a few tracks before I spun the receiver over to this Pioneer. So I do know that this CD can sound really good through these Sony speakers, but at the moment it is not sounding like that at all. So let's turn the volume down on the Pioneer and turn it off, because I don't want to listen to that like that anymore. I need to put me little bits of polystyrene and me cardboard back under the speakers like I had 'em last night, and let's see if that improves the sound. Because it did last night on that Sansui. When I done this, it really took things to another level with these little speakers. So I've just put my bit of polystyrene down, and I put my little bit of cardboard on now, and that cardboard is long enough so it sticks out the back of the speakers and stops the back sitting on the table where I've got the front raised. So that's all I'm doing, just doing them like that. And last night that made a really big improvement. So hopefully it will do the same again tonight. So let's just do the other one. Put me bit of polystyrene down, little bit of cardboard, and then put the speaker back on top, and then we'll have another listen. So that's that speaker back in place, and that's all I've done. I've just lifted the fronts, and that bit of cardboard is just isolating the very back of the speaker a little bit off of the table. And last night it really improved things. So let's turn the Pioneer back on, give it a little bit of volume, and see what these speakers sound like now. And straight away I am noticing that they are sounding better like this on the polystyrene and that, but they still sound a little bit like the treble's been turned up on the amp, so they are far from sounding as nice as they did on the Sansui. They do not sound like that. They sound like a totally different set of speakers on this Pioneer as opposed to when they was on that Sansui. So on that Sansui, I had the first 4 tracks of this album, and each one of them sounded really good through that Sansui. I had a lovely bit of vocals going on. I had nice trumpets, saxophones and drums. It was all going on and sounding really good. But it is not all going on tonight with these speakers on this Pioneer. The low end is alright. Now I've done that polystyrene and that, the low end of these speakers, the bottom end is sounding alright. It's sounding quite nice. It's the top end where the problem is. The top end is not sounding like I know it can with these Sony speakers. And a bit of that might be the way that Sansui delivers the sound. It is much more laid back than this Pioneer in the way it delivers everything. And it seems to drive the music more with the bass. It is more bass orientated, that Sansui. Whereas this Pioneer is a lot more lively. It really is a lively little amplifier, this one. And I would say this Pioneer is a bit more top end orientated to the Sansui. So as I am getting a bit of trouble with the top end, I'm going to spin these speakers over. So let's turn the volume down again and turn the Pioneer off. So yeah, I'm going to spin these speakers round, because really I have got them the wrong way round. They are a pair, these speakers, and the tweeters really should go in the middle. But where I was listening to them on the Sansui and I had reggae going through them, I did think they sounded a bit better in the bass with the pull on the inside, so that is why I was listening to them the wrong way round. But as at the moment the top end is the trouble, let's put them how they should be and see if that improves the top end, because this is the way you should have these speakers. If they're a pair, the tweeters should go on the inside. So I've put these speakers back now in the positions that Sony intended you to listen to these. And I'll just make a little adjustment on this one because it is not pointing right at me. So get that one into place and let's have another listen, see if that improves things. I really don't think it will make much of a difference, but it is worth a try. Anything that might tame this Sony tweeter is worth a try, because at the moment it is running amok, that tweeter. So let's turn the Pioneer back on, give it a little bit of volume, and see if by turning these speakers round we have managed to tame that wild tweeter. And now instantly that tweeter is just running wild. And it might not be just that tweeter running wild like a child round a playground. It might have also took the hand of the bass driver and now be dragging that wildly round the playground with it. Because with these Sony speakers, they have not got a crossover in them. All they have got is one capacitor on the tweeter. So the bass driver in these is getting all the frequencies. And where this Pioneer is a bit more top end orientated, that bass driver might be picking that up a bit more. Whereas it didn't do it on the Sansui. On the Sansui, that driver was sounding lovely. But on this Pioneer, because of the way this Pioneer's top end is, it might be putting a bit too much high frequencies into that bass driver. So that bass driver is adding to the sound of the tweeter. So not only is the tweeter running wildly out of control, but the bass driver is going, I'll have some of that, and joining in with it. Now I'm not sure if that is correct or that is what is actually going on, but I just thought that, and there could be something in that because I am definitely getting too much top end. And that wouldn't be a bad thing if I was getting a really lovely top end, but I am not. It is a little bit tinny. So I've got to go back to the other CD here. I'm going to put the reggae CD back in that I had playing yesterday, because I can't listen to this lovely jazz album no more. It is getting crucified by that tweeter. So hopefully if I put the reggae CD back in, it might tame things down a bit because it'll be more bass driven. So I'll be getting a lot less highs and a lot more lows. So hopefully it'll tame that top end a bit and get these Sonys back sounding as good as I know they can sound. And also I know that this Pioneer can sound really good, but so far tonight with these Sonys on it, it is not giving me none of that. But hopefully putting some reggae through it might sort that out. It might have been that that jazz CD just really didn't suit this little combination of receiver and speakers. And straight away that reggae has just kicked in, and straight away I can hear that it is sounding a bit better. But the top end is still a little bit on the wild side. So this reggae CD is not sounding nowhere near as good as what it did on the Sansui. So I'm going to turn the loudness on. Yes, the shame of it, I have pushed the loudness button just to see if it ups the low end a bit and balances it out more with the top end. But no, it hasn't. That really is fierce, that loudness button on this Pioneer. That really has upped the low end by quite a lot, and I'm getting a ton more bass. But I can still hear the tinniness of that tweeter over the top of it, and to tell you the truth, the bass driver is now sounding worse than it did before. So let's turn the loudness button off and get that bass driver back to sounding normal again. And I'm going to try it with the treble. I'm going to turn the treble down a bit to try and tame it. Now, I don't normally do this. I normally listen to amplifiers and receivers with the bass and treble set on 0, because that is how the manufacturer wanted you to listen to it. So normally I don't play around with the bass or the treble, but in this case I feel like I've got to try and tame the top end on these Sonys. So I've turned that treble down by 2 clicks, and it has straight away reduced the amount of top end I'm getting. If anything, I've made it a little bit flat sounding by doing that. So let's go back up 1. So that is 1 click down on the treble on the Pioneer, and that is sounding better. 1 click down on the treble has sort of put things into balance a little bit, but these speakers are still not sounding as good as they did on that Sansui. They are a long way off sounding like they did with that Sansui receiver. So if you're watching this and it's the first time that you've seen anything about these Sony speakers or this Pioneer SX434, don't write the pair of them off. These are a good set of speakers, they really are. I've had these sounding really nice for a little cheap speaker. And this Pioneer is a really good receiver. I've had this Pioneer sounding really good. But it's just the thing where I don't think these speakers and this receiver are friends. They just don't get on. They call it synergy, and you find it a lot. You could have really high-end speakers that sound excellent, but on the odd amplifier, they won't deliver nothing special because they don't work with that amplifier. And I think that's a bit of what's going on here. This Pioneer SX434 and these Sony speakers just don't get on. They have got no synergy. And it's not like at the moment it is sounding really bad. With that treble down 1 click, it's not sounding that bad. If this was the first time I was playing these little speakers, I'd think, yeah, they're not too bad really for a little set of budget bookshelves. It's only the fact that I've had them on that Sansui, and I've had these things sounding really good for little cheap speakers. That is why I'm being a little bit hard on them tonight, because I know how good they can sound and how good they did sound on that little Sansui 310. And because these speakers sounded much better on that Sansui, it does not mean that that Sansui is a better receiver than this Pioneer, because it is not. They are both really good receivers. It's just they have very different sound characteristics to them. So I'm going to turn the volume down and shut the Pioneer off, put the treble back to normal, and then I'm going to do what I did last night. I'm going to move these speakers 2 on top of the Kefs to move them further away from me and get them wider apart and see if that improves the sound of them on this Pioneer. Because I really did change the sound of these speakers last night when I done this, because I had them on the Sansui nice and close to me on the table, and then I moved them further away onto the top of these Kefs, and it really changed how they sound. I was getting a much bigger sound out of them. Now, I'm not sure if it was a much better sound, but it definitely was much bigger, although I do think I lost a little bit of the detail that I was getting out of them when I had them close up sitting on the table. So I'm going to move them to back on top of the Kefs just to see what this Pioneer does with these speakers in this situation, because it might make a massive difference and it might make them sound a lot better. It might not, but it could do, so it is well worth trying. So let's get the other speaker down and into place on top of my nice new Kef Cantor speaker stands. And let's go back to the Pioneer and fire it up and see what it sounds like now, with the speakers much further away and much further apart. So let's turn the Pioneer back on. She'll give it a bit of volume and let's see what it's doing now. Have we cracked the puzzle on how to get a good sound out of these Sonys with this Pioneer? So I would say that we have cracked the puzzle a little bit, because I do think this is the best sound that I have had out of this setup all night. So the top end is definitely not as overpowering as it was when the speakers was on the table. So by moving them back and moving them wider apart, we definitely have tamed that top end a little bit. So let's just knock the treble down one notch again, because it did sound better like that when they was on the table. So that's one notch down on the treble. Let me get a nice bit of distance between me and the speakers and let's have another listen. And that is sounding the best I've had it sounding all night, but still there is no way these speakers are sounding as good as they did on that little Sansui. So obviously that laid back characteristics of the Sansui really suits these Sony speakers, but the liveliness of this Pioneer doesn't suit 'em. So you're gonna have to face facts on this one. These Sony speakers and this Pioneer are not friends, and that's it really. They don't hate each other. What I'm listening to now really isn't too bad, but it's not as good as you could be. I could get a much better sound out of this Pioneer with different speakers, and I can get a much better sound out of these Sonys with another amplifier. So there's the rub. These two together is not really a good match, or bad synergy as people would say. So that is a thing, we have shown it tonight. Synergy does exist. You've got to have speakers that work well with your amplifier or receiver, else things don't sound as good as they could. So what have we learnt tonight? We have learnt that synergy really is a thing, and we have learnt that if you own a Sansui 310 receiver and you put a set of these Sonys on it, you will be very happy. But if you own a Pioneer SX434, do not buy a set of these Sony speakers for it. And we have also learnt that if you own a set of these Sony speakers, don't buy a Pioneer SX434. No, I'm going to rephrase that. Do buy a Pioneer SX434. It is a lovely receiver, but buy new speakers as well, because this Pioneer and these Sony speakers definitely are not a hi-fi match that was made in heaven. So the next video I will be doing with these Sonys, I will be doing the same again, but I will be using a Rotel RA310 amplifier, and that is a very different little beast again to the Sansui and this Pioneer. So it'll be very interesting to see how these Sonys work with that one. So thank you for watching, and I shall see you next time.